All right, welcome today to the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusivity and Trauma-Informed Care Workshop. Today, we're going to have an amazing leadership conference that is focused on DEI building knowledge and resilience. We want to overcome traumatic stress during the pandemic. And so we're going to learn so much today from our amazing speakers. Our goal is to understand how individual action, behavioral responses, and these patterns and systems perpetuate discrimination and even unintentional or intentional harm that leads to trauma. So we have an amazing team of speakers who are on board to empower you and to provide you with information and resources to help you lead your team in the future. What we're going to do now is we're going to talk to you about this initiative and this project that we have going on dealing with DEI and trauma-informed care. And I'm also going to talk to you about how the workshop will work. So everybody who is a participant today, you all received an email that put you into either group A or group B of this workshop. So this first link that you have, this is the link that will be active from 5 p.m. until 6:15 p.m. And so what we have going on, until 6:35 p.m. And during this time, what we will do is we will engage a keynote speech that will be prompted by the understanding of diversity, equity, and inclusivity. And you will learn a lot about the Stubblefield Institute's Listen, Learn, Engage initiative. And then we will have a panel discussion about DEI and trauma-informed care. At that point at 6:35, you will then jump into the next Zoom link, which will be your breakout session. And in that breakout session, you will hear from 4 phenomenal speakers, but these speakers are going to give their presentations twice. So you better give them some good energy because they have to do it 2 times. So what they're going to do is they're going to go in one session and they're going to give their talk and they're going to jump out and they're going to go into the next session and they're going to give that second talk. So probably usually the second time is just like so amazing that you don't even know what to do with yourself. So I don't know. So I know that you all are going to get something great because you're going to get the second talk from everybody. And then after we have that in our breakout sessions, then we'll come back to this link here. And we'll have a Q&A where you have our diversity leaders here and you'll be able to ask us questions that relate or that do not relate to the talks that we provided. So the different information and questions that you have, you'll provide those. But guess where you're going to provide them? In the chat. You're going to provide those questions in the chat. So you're going to stay and you're going to navigate through the chat and you're going to use your best civil, amazing, dynamic chat voices as we communicate. And us leaders who are used to navigating the chat and navigating conversations, we will answer questions and we will engage fairly. We will make sure that we address as much as possible. We're going to have resources available for you. There's a website that we're going to have where there's going to be a video of this experience that you have here so that you can share it with your friends and your colleagues and your peers. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pass the baton over to Cindy Powers. But in the meantime, I'm going to place into the chat the links for breakout session A and the link for breakout session B. And what's going to happen here is if you didn't receive an email and you're on here today, I want you to go into breakout session A. All right. So if you did not receive an email, for whatever reason, and you're on this right now, I want you to click on to breakout session A when it's time. But what you'll see is a nice little guide. So when you click my link, it's going to be an amazing guide that takes you through the links and the times, and it's going to have the speakers listed. Everything you need is going to be there for you to not be confused. But if you get confused, you can open up your chat and you can private message me. And I will take my time and answer your questions and help you feel comfortable in this process. Okay? Wonderful. Cindy, take them away.
Hello, I'm Cindy Powers with the Stubblefield Institute for Civil Political Communications here at Shepherd University. And I run the Listen, Learn, Engage initiative, which is leadership and civic engagement programming for students at Shepherd. And we felt that it was really important to bring this conversation to our students and our community at this time when the pandemic has obviously created a lot of trauma on the individual level, as well as collective trauma. And then on top of that, it has also highlighted the massive inequities that still exist within our social and economic systems. And so while these cultural competencies around these two topics are really important for all of us to understand, understanding the intersection between these two areas feels really important right now as we are educating students to go into the social services field, as well as supporting those who are already working in social services. So thank you to our wonderful speakers tonight who are here to share their insight and wisdom on the intersection of these two very important topics.
Dr. Albasi, you're muted.
Oh, man. Sorry. I've been only using Zoom for 5 years. Sorry about that. So thank you, Cindy, for sharing the information about Stubblefield. What I would like to do right now is place this overview and introduction of Mr. Jarvis M. Watson into the chat for you to learn more about him. But I will tell you that Jarvis Watson is an amazing man that I met at an IDI workshop, and he inspired me and he empowered me. And now I am so excited for him to have the opportunity to do this for you as well. He's going to talk to us about DEI and trauma-informed care. He's going to help us to understand how racial inequity and social justice can be addressed using the philosophies that he provides for us today. So, Jarvis, Dr. Watson,
yes.
Let them know what they need.
Am I live and direct?
You're live and direct.
Right.
So live.
Thank you, Dr. Howard Bostic. I don't know if anybody else is feeling this, but she is definitely the caffeine in this session. I'll probably last few days, and I'm definitely grateful for the opportunity to speak with you all today. As you said, my name is Dr. Jarvis Watson. I am the inaugural DI director for School of Visual Arts in New York City. So for those on the East Coast and those in the South, I just want to say we're all family here today. But it's a pleasure for me to warm it up for Dr. Allison Jackson, who you'll hear from in a few seconds. And I understand I only have but 12 minutes to do what I have to do. So we're going to warm it up and we're going to get busy. Are we ready? All right. So before I begin, I would like to make sure that we have a land acknowledgement. So let me share my screen. Make sure I have the right document. Play. As we talk about trauma, I think it's important that we understand where trauma first started here in the United States and in America. And we want to do that by making sure we have a land acknowledgement for those who came before us. So like what I usually say before I begin, I'd like to take this time to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of Muncie, Lenape, Unkeechuk, Shinnecock, and Secretog. Now that's only a few of the nations that have pretty much that make up America. This is where I am in Long Island in New York City. These are the nations that I represent and actually connect with on a regular basis. But these indigenous nations had their land taken from them by force. However, they are still here and they continue to thrive. It is important to acknowledge their presence and relevance to this country and to this conversation. So I just wanted to make sure we took some time to recognize those that have come before us and those whose land that we're on right now. So just want to take that a minute. Okay. So like I said, this past several years have provided us with unprecedented acts of discrimination, violence, loss, and trauma. As we begin to discuss how institutions and organizations respond to trauma via their DEI context, we have to first understand the definitions of trauma for this discussion, as well as historical trauma. I have about 10 more minutes to complete this section. So I will briefly go over the 3 types of trauma that we have been exposed to. If you look at the slide, according to the American Psychological Association, APA, and Missouri's Early Care Connections, they address trauma as something that results from an event, series of events, or a set of circumstances that is experienced by an individual as physically or emotionally harmful or threatening, and that can have lasting adverse effects on the individual's functioning and physical, social, emotional well-being. Now, if you look at the definitions that I have here on the screen, there's 3 types: acute, chronic, and complex. Now, this will give people an opportunity to read it, but you think to yourself, as you're reading off the definitions, either you or someone you know, or even going back to some of your past in your culture and your heritages, can identify like situations where trauma has either you've experienced this type, one of the 3, or all 3 at the same time. So I want to see, I know I can't see anybody's head nodding, but I'm pretty sure there's some people's head nodding right now, because you can kind of think and pinpoint certain types of trauma that connect with these definitions. So I think it's important that we always point things out. That's what we do as DEI directors. We point things out so we can deconstruct them later on. As we provide context for these traumas for tonight's discussion, I want you to think about this. How many microaggressions have you had on a regular basis? How many times have you seen things in the news that look for people that look like you and sound like you, that make you think like your narrative is always going to be that negative and not positive? You also want to make sure that we are creating a counter narrative. So people want to always diss critical race theory, but I'm bringing it back. All right, we want to have this counter narrative to understand a little bit more about where this trauma comes from. It's not coming from within, it's coming from without, but that's a whole nother conversation at another time. We must recognize the historical trauma that historically marginalized groups in this country continue to endure through within the context of healthcare. COVID-19 exposed historical disparities and traumas faced by those with intersectional identities such as race, ethnicity, sexuality, gender, ability, national origin, religion. You can keep going down the road, but only have but 10 more minutes, right? Maybe 8 more minutes right now. Historical disparities within individual institutions were no longer siloed. There was a recognition and a call for racial and social reckoning within the following institutions: healthcare, immigration, education, real estate, technology, policing, politics, and voting. And if you haven't realized how politics has been weaponized, you haven't been watching TV or you've been on another planet. Okay, so these are another types of traumas that we've been witnessing within these institutions. And this is the first time we've seen this. If you know anything about voting and politics in America, for African Americans, we've always been on that middle ground or that chopping block or that selling block in regards to how policies are being made based off the backs of those who are enslaved or who were enslaved. So we want to kind of focus on some of the things that happened during this time. The second wave of Black Lives Matter reminded us that we are still living in a society that sees BIPOC populations as less than or not important as. To reference Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, what we thought was eradicated during the Civil Rights era reared its ugly head as we witnessed countless numbers of BIPOC individuals, regardless of education, regardless of wealth, dying due to complications associated with substandard healthcare, lack of care due to immigration or citizenship, lack of resources for certain school systems. When we're talking about lack of technology, nutrition, and educators. Countless numbers of individuals lost to police violence and brutality. Being on one side of the aisle politically was being weaponized as we saw our nation turn on itself on January 6th. I know I only have a few more minutes to open up this conversation regarding trauma-informed care and DEI, so I will direct my conversation to how institutions responded. But first, I have to point out a collection of historical trauma-induced movements that helped us understand that there are systemic and structural plans designed to impede the growth and livelihood of historically marginalized groups. Black Lives Matter, first and second wave. Hopefully it's not a third wave. Stopping the disappearance of Indigenous women, not just here in America, but globally. Stopping discrimination at the US-Mexican border. Stop Asian hate. Stopping the violence towards transgender and gender nonconforming individuals. Challenges with accessibility for individuals with visible and hidden disabilities. And once you start to have intersectionalities with these identities, the problem gets a little bit more traumatic, the problem gets a little bit more intricate. So we'll look at that as we talk about complex trauma. This is what we're talking about. So just to kind of give you some pictures, because I'm at the School of Visual Arts, so I can't do my job if I don't bring the visuals. But if you took some time to watch this, if you wanted to even take a screenshot of this right now, I think this helps to kind of encapsulate what's been going on all at the same time while we had COVID and these social movements. Nothing stopped. If you look at the Black Trans Lives Matter, you see someone carrying a speaker while the other person is speaking. That's called allyship. I don't know if y'all noticed it. That was like one of the most poignant pictures I've ever seen. So institutional responses. We saw the resilience of many groups and allies regarding the historical oppressive trauma. Globally, there was an intergenerational and intercultural collective response that provided us to witness people taken to the streets in unprecedented numbers and demanded a global racial reckoning that included the intersectional identities and voices of historically marginalized groups. As it pertains to higher education, I'm going to talk about within context, as well as other institutions. We as DEI directors and chief diversity officers were called upon to assist, create, manage, and implement the following initiatives and actions. Now, how genuine the actions were varied by institutions and their leadership. What I'm talking about are there institutions that just did a checkbox, or we did it and we're done. Or the institutions that really, because of the fact that they were seeing some institutional needs, some needs for institutional change at their particular college and universities, that we needed to step our game up. So some of the things that developed were the development of support in employee resource groups, or ERGs. I know a number of places had situations where we had like African Americans speaking to each other, or Black individuals, we had Asian Americans speaking to each other, we had Latinx, but we needed these spaces while the Black kids sitting together in the cafeteria kind of conversations. That was what was happening, because we needed to have that time and space. Recognition of racial hierarchies. People realized that there were people at the bottom that looked a certain way and the people at the top that looked a certain way. So people started doing some self-reflection and realizing that there's some racial hierarchies there that needed to be dismantled. Creating DEI strategic plans and CDO hiring. A lot of us got a lot of jobs, the CDOs and chief diversity and directors of diversity, equity, and inclusion during this time. Once again, some were knee-jerk and some were right on time. Department and organization reflective initiatives. We did diversity roundtables. I think Dr. Howard Bossy talked about the fact that we did the IDI, Intercultural Development Inventories. So schools are doing these type of things. DEI education, training, and instruction, microaggressions, bias, inclusive bias, implicit bias, power and privilege kind of conversations, whether it be asynchronous or synchronous. And there's a lot of protests and demonstrations. We all went to the streets in some form or fashion. For those who didn't go into the streets, there was other ways that we protested, but there was people from all over the globe that were participating in saying the trauma has to stop. We have to stop this wound. I don't know if you know about the Greek interpretation of the word trauma, but it's also connected with the word wound. So we have to ask ourselves this question. This is a great segue going to my good buddy, Dr. Allison. Allison Jackson is coming up next. When did we pause? When did we pause for recognition, for recognizing the impact of the historical trauma that has been placed on us, as well as our colleagues and our fellow family members and people we call friends? When did we have time to self-reflect? When did we pause to kind of think like, what's going on right now? When did we take the time to center ourselves through our spirituality? Now, notice I didn't say religion, I said spirituality. Mourning those that we lost. Some of us just got busy, but when did we get a chance to really sit and think about for those who lost? A good friend of mine I went to college with is no longer with us because of COVID. I'm still trying to figure out how to grieve about that. Honoring frontline and essential workers. These people put themselves at harm's risk, and still putting themselves at harm's risk. Remember, people used to put lights on and clap hands and things like that, but we don't see that anymore. We got to make sure we honor those people that are on the front lines, putting themselves in harm's way, just so we can be safe. And then the last thing, and I think this is not a destination, it's more of a journey, the restoration, which is a process of how we fight this battle. We're at war every day, and we got to come home and make sure that we recharge, but not just for one day. How do we restore ourselves to make sure we fight this fight and sustain this fight? Because it is a battle, and how do we pass this down to the next group? Because like I said, the trauma is historical. The trauma is built with legacy, but we have the opportunity to change that just by how we're doing some of those things that we talked about, what we do as DEI leaders and CDOs. We have to make sure that whatever we're doing is not just about doing it for a checkbox. We have to do it to make sure that we find a time to grieve and heal. We have to, on a macro level, not just say that we did all the right things, not just about doing that, I did the process. It's more about, did we put care? Did we put concern? Did we put some type of empathy into the things that we're doing to make sure that we don't have a revisit of some of the similar things that we did before? Now, I know I have only but 30 more seconds, I think, to to talk about some of the things that are here today. But individually, I want to say, when the smoke cleared, how do we conduct self-checks to make sure that we're doing okay and not doing okay? Which I think Dr. Allison Jackson will kind of talk about in a little bit. So like being that I have 30 more seconds to remind you all that we need to make sure that we restore and reflect on how far we've come. The speaker that I will bring out next will help us understand the importance of centering and focusing on the maintenance and the upkeep of the temple that we call home. It doesn't mean my time is up. Oh, somebody's. Oh,
No,
okay.
you keep going.
Okay.
No, you're okay.
The place that we protect, our minds and our hearts, what we identify as our body, what we exclaim to never compromise, which is our souls. Within the next 30 seconds that I have, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker to kind of take the reins from, as I talked about the macro and the meso, to take it to the micro, the individual, to help us understand how to restore, how to get centered, how to make sure that we are not burning ourselves out, but also understand and be able to recognize the trauma that before it even comes to us in about 2 or 3 steps, that we can see it coming down the road, coming off the horizon. But hopefully there's one day we don't see that trauma anymore and we can live a different life. Hope I warmed it up for everyone. Thank you so much. And I hand it back over to Dr. Chiquita Howard-Bostic. I'm done. You're on mute, Chiquita.
Go ahead and unshare your screen for us.
Oh, I can do that.
All right.
My thing will work. Oh, I forgot to say thank you. Thank you. And that's my information. I can share the PowerPoint with folks if they need to. It's not a problem.
We'll definitely get a copy of that. So we'll get, go ahead and email that to me now, Dr. Watson, and we will be sure to get that to everybody ASAP.
Will do.
All right. So next, I put a little blurb about Dr. Allison Jackson in the chat, but Dr. Jackson Dyer is a person of lived experience as well as professional. And she provides a leadership development series, and she's talking about behavioral health. She's talking about education, child welfare, criminal justice systems for over 25 years. She has provided in the past outpatient therapeutic services for people who have been exposed to childhood trauma, as well as military service members and their family. Her clinical practice and research have focused on advancing effective trauma-sensitive and resilient-oriented practices at the individual and community levels. I would like to pass the baton to Dr. Allison Jackson. I'm going to need someone to spotlight her and take me off as my screen is frozen and I can't do it.
All right, you are good. Thank you so much. What an incredible double introduction, really powerful. So hi, my name is Allison. Officially, I'm Dr. Jackson, or some people call me Dr. J. I'm getting used to Jackson Dyer as I just got married, and so that's an exciting new life experience. I'm excited to be with y'all today. What I'd first like to ask is just using the chat and using your voice, like how are you feeling right now? You know, Dr. Watson, Jarvis just laid a lot on us, right? And so I want to just really have you check in with your body, like what came up for you when you were listening to that? So I'm just going to watch. I'm going to make like 60 seconds of uncomfortable silence as I'm staring at this chat, seeing if I can get folks to kind of go, hey, truth, nice, like it. Thank you. Thank you, Kelsey. What else? What came up? I love it. Taking time to mourn. Powerful. Thank you for saying that out loud. Yes, taking time to mourn. You know, it's interesting in the United States, and keep bringing it in. Don't stop because I'm talking. And this is my opinion of noticing some differences in Eastern and Western culture in the world. And it's interesting that United States, on average, at a job, people are given about 3, max 5 days to mourn the loss of someone in their family. You know, in other countries and places in the world, they're given a year to a year and a half to mourn. But in the Western culture, it's an expectation of, okay, feel that, move on. Feel that, move on. And so thank you for talking about timing to mourn and overwhelmed with all that needs to be fixed. It's like, whoa, what am I supposed to do about all that?
Okay, so that's what I want to talk about. Those things that you just said, that is what I want to talk about. So here I go. I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to know that things are going to go wrong along the way because we are beautiful and imperfect. And that's part of what makes us beautiful. And here's my topic, bouncing back and thriving forward. This is about the resilient story. Okay. So what I want you to do right now is what I call a ground in. So wherever you are, sitting, standing, in whatever position you are, this is a ground in. It's only going to last 30 seconds, so hang with me. I want you to notice every place that your body is possibly touching a surface. Just notice the feel of where your body is touching that surface. And then you can make a decision to do this eyes open or eyes closed, because it's about your safety and what feels safe for you in the setting that you're in. If your eyes are open, sometimes it helps to find a focus or a gaze that softens. Now, for some people, breathing and focusing on their breath actually helps them relax. But I want you to remember that in the last 20 months, we have watched a respiratory illness kill a lot of people. And so breath doesn't feel safe. We've also watched people be murdered and watch them not be able to breathe. So something that used to be as simple as breath and feels safe may not feel safe. And so whatever feels safe for your body in this space right now, do that, right? So this is just going to be 30 seconds with the intention of, I want you to bring all of your energy into this moment, this time, letting everything else sit, just being present for this conversation because your presence matters. So here we go, 30 seconds. Okay. However, coming back feels for you, whatever movement helps that to happen, come back to this space. And I really mean it, that even though we're in this virtual disconnected environment, your presence matters. And every time that you check something else out, and sometimes it's necessary, but if it's not, every time you check something out, like your phone or something else, we lose you for a minimum of 15 minutes. And it matters, right? Because you matter. So I want to start with who I think is one of the greatest all-time philosophers. And I say this with all seriousness, Tupac Shakur. I think he nailed what resilience is 100%. Now, I do not rap and I will not do him justice, but I'm going to speak his words and I want you to hear what he's saying and see what it means to you. Did you hear about the rose that grew from a crack in the concrete? Proving nature's laws wrong, it learned to walk without having feet. Funny it seems, but by keeping its dreams, it learned to breathe fresh air. Long live the rose that grew from concrete when no one else even cared. Now listen to this stanza. You see, you wouldn't ask why the rose that grew from the concrete had damaged petals. On the contrary, we would all celebrate its tenacity. We would all love its will to reach the sun. Well, we are the rose, and this is our concrete, and these are my damaged petals. Don't ask me why, ask me how. So I've kind of tried to capture that image. And so on the one hand, we have that picture where I'm going to kind of go from where Jarvis took us is pushing through the concrete, right? So we are pushing and we are trying to walk without being given feet. There is adversity that has hit us likely before 20 months ago, likely before we were ever born. And yet right now, we have to show up now and have skills to show up now. And yet I had the privilege of going to Albany, New York, and I worked with a group of girls and boys actually who were in a residential setting where they were duly involved in the child welfare system and the criminal justice system, right? And so it was a locked facility. And I taught them a lot of the information I'm about to teach y'all. They were ages 14 to 21. And when I finished, they took me outside. They got the superintendent to say, hey, can we walk Miss Allison outside? So we walked outside and there was this beautiful rose bush. And I don't know if you can see it, but that's the building. That's the side of the building. And that's the blacktop. And they said, you know, Dr. Jackson, you gave us a new narrative about who we are. We aren't broken. We are the rose that grew out of concrete. That's what they took away from Tupac. They could see that. right? Because finally we were asking them how, not what's wrong with them, but what's strong about them. And yet when I was in Iowa speaking, I got the best question. They came up and said, Dr. J, we're so glad that you're talking about ways to build our resilience, but it comes back to what Dr. Watson was just talking about. Yes, do I want to grow through the concrete? Yes, but damn it, I want to smash some concrete because some of the things that are happening are not okay. And so we have a responsibility for both. We have a responsibility to learn how to move and grow through adversity. And we have a responsibility to say, this is not okay. And it needs to be different. And sometimes that means smashing concrete. And that's the resilience story. So right now, I want you to think of a story. I want you to think of a time when you handled a difficult event, or maybe it was a series of events in a way that you define, no one else, you define as being successful. Pull that up. Okay. Now, what worked well for you in that experience? Pull that up in your mind. What worked for you? What did you do? What did you focus on? What did you use? And now I want you to dig a little deeper. What specifically about you made it work? What was specific about you that made it work? And I want you to hold that because I'm going to come back there. All right. So this is kind of interesting how learning works, right? And it's kind of important for us to understand our brain. So I'm going to oversimplify. If you're taking anything around biology or pre-med or understand anything about medicine, I'm about to dumb this down a lot because I kind of try to learn like I teach. And so if I divide the brain just left and right, and there are a whole lot of ways to divide the brain, okay? The left side of the brain, okay, is very logical, very ordered. This comes first, this comes second, this comes third. Man, we lean onto a lot of that in higher education. Comprehension, reading, how do we give things back? How do we critically think about things? But then as we go across the corpus callosum over to this bridge, we actually go to this right side of the brain, and that is music and art and light and senses and touches. That is a language, but it's not a verbal language. But it is a language. So the right side of the brain doesn't speak a verbal language. Well, one of the things we believe is when trauma hits, when a hard thing hits, it hits the right side of the brain first. The Body Remembers is an incredible book about trauma. Okay. So when trauma hits, it goes into this place in the body and we store it in a smell, in a sound, in a touch, and our body stores that. And so then what will happen is somebody will then ask us, well, share your story, talk to me about that. And sometimes that's difficult because it was stored in a body memory, right? It didn't get stored in a verbal memory. And also there's a whole lot of social, political, and family rules about, hey, what do we share about things that have happened to us? In fact, it's so interesting because there's this place in the brain called Broca's area. It's the place of speech. And one of the things we learned in all this research is when you have experienced a trauma or you're re-experiencing a trauma, you've been triggered, one of the things that happens is Broca's area actually shuts down the ability to speak emotion, right? We can't get there. We can't verbally communicate what's happening to us, right? So what does this mean for how you're about to learn right now? Because I'm going to take you through a visual journey because I want to tap into your right hemisphere for a little bit of this presentation, and then we'll take us back to the left hemisphere. So we're going to try this test. So I don't know if you're in a room with other people or you're by yourself. I'm going to ask you on the trust factor to try this. What I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you out loud, read left to right when I say go. And what I want you to do is I want you to read the color of the word, not the word itself. So that first word would be red, not blue. And I want you to go as fast as you can, and then I'm going to stop you. All right? So ready, set, go. All right, I'm going to pause you. If you have kind of a type A personality and need to finish, you can do that. All right? But I'd love to get some chat about, was it hard? Was it easy? What happened when you started saying the color, not the word itself? Talk to me in the chat. What happened? Slow me up a bit. Yeah. Challenging. Yes. Had to work on it. Difficult. Yeah. So for many people I talk to, it's like red, blue, yellow, green. Well, what's happening is I asked you, right? Ooh, if you unfocus your eyes, you learn something about yourself. So what I asked you to do is I asked you to speak a language, but I asked you to speak a nonverbal language. I asked you to bring that color up in your mind, which required your right hemisphere to activate. Then I asked you to run across your corpus callosum and translate it into a verbal language that many of us speak. Okay. And it was difficult. So what I want you to imagine about trauma is, for most people, trauma is asking people to share some of the most difficult things that they have ever experienced with structural violence and family violence and community violence, and turn it into a language that the other person can understand. It is a biological condition. It has an effect on us. Interestingly, the military named it an invisible wound, right? We can't see it, but it absolutely affects us. So I'm going to ask you to dig into this experience of what happened since March of 2020. And so I'm going to ask you, as I guide you through this narration, which usually takes me about 7 or 8 minutes, to just hang with me, but also take care of yourself. Because if some of these images kind of pull up really hard things for you, go back to that ground in. Remember, you're not frozen in front of the screen. You can look away, you can move. You can think of now what I call an accountability partner. You can think of the person who, when this ends, you go, hey, I really need to talk to you. You may want to chat them, text them right now and say, you know what, I can tell I'm going to need to talk to somebody about this afterward. Are you there? Okay. But I want you to think about, I'm going to invite you to that pause Dr. Watson talked about, to think about life since March of 2020. So here we go. So maybe it looked like this. Now, the first thing that happens to me when I look at this picture, I'm like, oh, and then I go, oh my gosh, they're touching. We're not supposed to touch. We're supposed to be 6 feet away, right? We had those images of, if you have one of those smartphones that gives you images from the year before, I was fascinated that prior to March of 2021, I would get these images and I'd be like, where's my mask? Why was I with other people? And then I was like, oh yeah, it used to be like that. It used to be like that, where our knees could touch and we could be together right now, all together in a space, having this conversation that wasn't virtual. We could be in the college environment, in a higher institution environment, talking to each other, sharing things with other. Look, first thing that hits me, no masks. And they're inside. They're not 6 feet apart. They're listening. I can see their facial expressions. Time has named 2020 the age of anxiety. Well, we now know it extended way into 2021. Now, powerfully, one of the things that's happened is people that previously did not believe in anxiety, that kind of just thought, well, no, you just pull yourself from your bootstraps. Some people are weaker at that than others. Now people are very convinced at large that anxiety is real, right? This was the age of anxiety. So there was this moment, I want you to think about that. Yes, pour in your reflections. Thank you. The world is temporarily closed. I say everybody has a COVID date. Mine was March 13th, 2020. Until about a month ago was the last time I talked to people in the same room. It was the moment the kids came home from school and we thought, they'll be back in a couple weeks. And they didn't go back for over a year. That moment where it hits you, this isn't just a couple days thing. Something significant is happening. And a flood of panic, uncertainty, all of the things that the pandemic affected started to flood in for you, of how it was going to change your life, and then looking to the left or the right, how it was changing the world around you. For many of you, it may have early on looked like this. Powerful, April 3rd, 2020. Thank you for sharing that. It may have looked like this: remote learning, virtual learning, right? All of a sudden, and this shows my age, but Hollywood Squares became a thing like we're on right now, right? I mean, think about it. 80%, 60 to about, I think it's about 70 to 80% of communication is nonverbal. About 60% of that is actually our body language. About 20 to 30% of that is our tone of voice. And only 10% is what comes out of our mouths. We took away all of that. We got to having communication be based on a little bit tone of voice and this much of our bodies. But oftentimes it didn't look like this. It looked more like this because people's cameras were off. So we weren't even getting that. We're like, hello, hello, are people with me? Right? And there can be very good reasons for cameras to be off, but it created void and even less connection for so many. It created issues around diversity, inclusion, and equity because I don't want you to see where I live. I don't want you to see what's happening. I don't want you to see what I'm having to be responsible for. Outside became a safer place to be, right? Again, if the image strikes you and a reflection comes up, I welcome you to share that, but it also may be you're diving in yourself. When we were able to finally come back into classrooms and masks on, see the straps? It was a different lived experience. If we were in the working world in terms of, and many of us had both roles, but we all of a sudden are like, hey, I have to now have all these stickers on the floor. I started wondering about what the magic was with 3 and 6 feet, learning to stand on stickers, right? All of a sudden, if I'm an educator or if I'm trying to communicate any information, I'm like a TV star. I'm having to figure out how to teach to a camera without that feeling of connection, isolating and intimate at the same time. We call that the dialectic. Both are true at the same time. This is one of my favorite pictures because it usually makes me giggle. Many of us had to claim parts of our space, like I am right now, to be of dual purpose, right? But what I love about this picture too is many of us had to literally bring work into our homes, so we didn't leave work. There was no 2 spaces. All of a sudden, routine, boundaries, day and night, it all blended. And we lost a lot of our roles and a lot of role confusion. But many people didn't get that choice. They were like, wow, I hear all these people talking about remote work, but I'm an essential worker. I'm still out there. You know what's fascinating? I couldn't find pictures of essential workers. Most of it was focused on the voice of people that were home. So what was that experience like if you didn't have that option? Right? So maybe during all this, your best days looked like this, right? The new handshake. It took me probably 4 or 5 months to learn to not reach my hand out to shake people's hands. And then I went to elbows. And then I remember when I went to my first face-to-face training 6 weeks and this guy came up and stuck out his hand and I jumped back. And he was like, oh man, I'm sorry. And I was like, whoa, I just jumped back from a hand. But I was uncomfortable. And then I was like, oh, no, we're good. We can shake hands. I'm vaccinated. And I'm like, oh gosh, now I put pressure on him if he's not vaccinated, right? And I'm like, wait, how can it be this uncomfortable just to say, hey, maybe we were able to really blend and balance our work and our home lives, right? Maybe we were able to do parallel process, have that intimacy, that connection. But if you're a little bit like me, a lot of it may have looked like this. You may have felt really lost. You may have felt, we know that school is one of the safest places for kids. And when they lost that, they lost a major part of their routine. My daughter, I have 3 daughters, age 25, 20, and 15. It was interesting to watch that experience. But my 20-year-old got to have like a semester of a normal college experience, and then everything changed. And some people thought, oh, aren't you lucky to take your classes remote? And she's like, no, I wanted to go to the cookie place at 3 a.m. I wanted to sit in the coffee shop and have conversations. Each of us experienced loss from what happened during that time. For me, it was a lot of my, I'm happy that my dogs aren't barking and my kid isn't screaming upstairs, right? I was like, okay, I gotta look like a professional for 3 hours, y'all. I need the rest of the world not to enter. This one really cracks me up because of the word dream in the background, because this is like totally living the dream. right? And I remember some of the principals I was working with in high school. One was at a dental office, and the person said, "Yeah, what do you do for a living?" He's like, "Oh, I'm a high school principal." And the hygienist like grabbed him and hugged him. He was like, "Whoa!" She's like, "Oh, you need to bring him back. I so appreciate you." I mean, I have a PhD. I realized I don't want to homeschool my kids. I'm not good at it. I'm not good at it. And all of a sudden it was, okay, whew, this is a lot of together, right? But then there were some people, my husband is an ICU nurse, and I expected when this started and he was doing bedside on the weekends that we would see a lot of COVID cases. You know what he saw a lot of? Strokes, people that lived alone and they had a stroke and no one checked on them for 3 days until they were found and brought to the hospital. So some of us were experiencing, this is too much, family. I need people to go to their own space. And some of us experienced being completely alone and disconnected from the rest of the world because those people previously were at their jobs and somebody connected with them every day. They saw them. One of my daughter's girlfriend is actually, for a long time or during COVID, was a grocery clerk. And she said, "Miss Allison, I've got people coming through my line every day saying, 'Can I just stop for a second and talk to you? Because you're the only face I see every day.'" And they would always come to her line. And she's like, "I'm not a mental health therapist. I'm like a grocery clerk." But they wanted connection, right? Essential workers and the rest of us. I mean, when I was doing outpatient therapy, all of a sudden I'm checking temperatures. I never thought I would have to do rapid COVID tests. I mean, all kinds of jobs and roles that I was like, wait a minute, this is not me. And it might create distance. But COVID wasn't all that impacted us over the last 20 months, right? Isolation, right? Substance use skyrocketed because people were trying to numb the experience of what was happening. So substance use skyrocketed while access decreased to service. Suicide increased while many psychiatric hospitals shut down because of workforce issues. There was the mental health aspect of COVID that has been so severe that we've created new diagnoses about it. Post-COVID mental disorder, post-COVID fatigue, languishing, this experience of going, I'm having trouble moving, I'm having trouble getting going, right? All of a sudden, and I giggle, but it's because I'm uncomfortable, right? And it's because it's like when I go, dang, do I have to put on like pants today because I got to go to real work? I got to drive. And then I got mad that people were on the roads because I got used to nobody driving. And now I'm like, why are all y'all going to work? Right? But what's happened is all of a sudden I have gone from 90 miles an hour to 30 miles an hour, and my body's having trouble streaming back up to 45. I'm having a challenge with that. And then there was unrest. There are many predictions that why is it that hundreds and hundreds of year-old issue around racism got a new attention placed to it during this time? Well, some of the belief is we were put in freeze. And in a state of freeze, we began watching images in social media that we had been able to ignore or possibly not pay attention to, but now we were flooded and we couldn't not look. And yet we couldn't connect and talk about it face to face. Yet issues of I can't breathe, watching videos of the George Floyd murder, which after the first time, I decided I had to make a choice not to watch it again, and then felt shame that I could say, I don't want to watch that again because it was so painful. Knowing that my children, who happen to be members of the BIPOC community, they worry every day where they drive. And my oldest daughter has had six friends of hers murdered in the last 3 years. But I, with my white privilege, right, and my ability to say, but I don't want to hear that, wanted to pull away from having to viscerally live it. So then I threw myself into, we got to have a conversation about it, but I can't viscerally watch it. And I had to go back and dig deeper into my own white fragility and say, what am I going to do inside about this? Not just become an advocate and march and be involved. What am I going to do inside about this? No justice, no peace, which in the best situations led to incredible conversations and a renewed Black Lives Matter movement to have the conversation, but also led to moments of violence, which re-traumatized people. It's both and, it's not either or. And there is a spectrum which has created polarization that has existed for so long of affirmative action to all lives matter, right? Who's the victim? Who's the aggressor? What is privilege? Are we allowed to say privilege? Well, I have many, I'm straight, I'm white, I'm middle class, all privilege, right? Dominant identities, right? Well, I have a mental health challenge, right? I have children with special needs, minimized. So who am I? And how do I deal with the complexity of that? Because many people want me to be put in a box. And all of this led to us, which you may feel right now, the pressure of that. How did that affect you? And our instinct is to say, I've gotten this many times when I've done this part of the presentation, Allison, why are you taking me back there? I don't want to see that. And my part goes back to what Dr. Watson said, is many of us didn't see it the first time because we had to survive. And one of the things we know about grief, which loss and grief work is trauma work. It is to feel that pain and loss and let it move through our body and take the time to do that. Because without that, we shove it down and we shove it down until eventually it shuts us down or it explodes. And so that's why I just took y'all through this. So I want you to take a deep breath. And I really mean that. Just breathe in, breathe out. And I want you to remind yourself that in the midst of all of that, you showed up in whatever way you could. No judgment. You showed up. You focused on meeting whatever community needs you could while trying to figure out what your own needs were. And for that, I want to say a genuine thank you. And when I say thank you right now, if you feel that, nah, you don't know what I did, I don't want to accept that thank you, pay attention to what part of your body is refusing my thank you, is refusing being a hero. Because for many people, it's, I might have to feel all I've lost if you tell me thank you. I might have to see what I've done if I say thank you. I might have to remember the people I've lost if I say thank you. So now I'm going to do what I call a ground out, okay? So it's the same thing. Pay attention to the surfaces that are touching your body right now, where it makes contact. Decide if you want to do eyes open, eyes closed, right? Really breathe if that feels safe to you. If not, doodle, focus, relax the body, try stillness with the intention of knowing that whatever you were meant to learn in the last 20 minutes is exactly what you learned. And now we're ready to transition into the conversation. So 30 seconds. Okay, whatever coming back means to you, wiggling toes, wiggling hands, moving a little bit, taking a sip of water. Welcome back. And I want to say it again, whatever you just learned and reflected on, that's exactly what you're meant to learn. So let me just take a moment, actually. I would love to see the chat. What came up? What came up? Whatever language you have. Powerful. A sense of peace, a space to feel loss, patience. Powerful. Peace. Just realized how much I've been avoiding looking back at the last 20 months. A lot of suppressed pain. powerful for those of you who are answering. And if chat's not your thing, feel it. Say it out loud if you're alone. Learning how to slow down, to hear myself breathe and think, but to feel, yes. Slow down, pause. Knowing I need to focus on me, but needing to care for others too. And isn't it tough that we have to stick a but in there because so often we're taught it's an either or. Powerful. I was once taught but negates everything in front of it. And not that this is what you meant, Anne, but so many times I have forgotten me to take care of other people. And Doc. All right. So Jarvis actually set me up for success because one word for what you've lived in the last 20 months is called trauma. You had acute trauma, you had chronological trauma, chronic trauma, which means more than one. Complex trauma is often used to describe things that happened to prior 18. And maybe this was happening to you prior to 18, right? But I also like to say complex because it touched into parts of us that were aching and wounded from childhood, right? So what do we know about trauma? Again, Jarvis set me up. You know, it is an event, it is an experience, it is an effect. It is what happens to you. It is not what is wrong with you. I want to say that again. It is what happens to you. It is not what is wrong with you. And it is the experience that something is life-threatening. And by the way, perception is 100% accurate to the person perceiving it. All right. So what we've seen is if I emotionally feel life-threatened, then you can't take that away from me because that's my experience. You don't get to say I didn't feel that way. And we've actually seen in studies with foster care children, when we have compared, and I hate comparative suffering. Comparative suffering from Dr. Brene Brown is we look at, okay, so you've been bullied and I've been to war. Well, I can't feel the pain of my bullying because it's not as bad as the war. Well, we got enough empathy, folks, to hold the space for what hurts being bullied and hold the space for it hurts for people to be at war. All right. So when we look at kids in foster care, many times the parts of the brain damaged by trauma, more of that than people that were in active combat in Afghanistan. So this idea that physical trauma is more severe than emotional trauma, it just isn't so. And in childhood, about 46 million of 76 million children are exposed to violence and crime and abuse each year. Right? And we know it has tons of effects. Over 70 types of mental and physical health at least are impacted by trauma. All right, because it changes behavior. And so we look at things like ACEs, a definition for trauma. It changes the way the brain works. It changes the way I connect socially, how I see emotions, how I process things. It leads to at-risk health behaviors like aggression, like substance use, like cutting. It leads to disease, disability, and social problems and early death. So that's trauma once I'm in the world. But here's the thing, y'all, we got to talk about structural violence. So now I'm going to build back up to where Dr. Watson took us because we wanted to start macro, go meso, go inside of our own experience and then come back out. All right. Structural violence is one way of describing social arrangements that put individuals and populations in harm's way. The arrangements are structural because they are embedded in the political and economic organization of our social world. They are violent because they cause injury to people, right? It is visited upon all of those whose social status denies them access to the fruits of science and social progress. Trauma is a science, and understanding it is not one more label we're putting on people with minimized identities. It is letting them understand and have the right to understand a health issue that affects them. And I'm struggling with one word I've been struggling with for a year. I shared this with Jarvis. I used to say, I want to empower you, but here's the thing I want to say about that. That immediately assumes I have power and I'm giving it to you. And that could be structurally true. But what I want to say is you have power, you have resilience. I want to awaken that inside of you. You have that power. And this information, when I share it, it will awaken in you and you will carry it to someone else. That's my ask. Carry this information to someone else. And this is what they did in RISE. RISE is Richmond, California. And they said, okay, academics, we get that you put all this fancy stuff together, right? And that's great. But let me tell you that trauma doesn't start when I'm born or I'm in my mom's womb. It actually starts with the zip code I'm born into, because my zip code determines the access to resources I have before I'm ever born. We actually can name zip codes. Where I am in Richmond, Virginia, right? We have a redevelopment housing area, which some people call the hood or the projects. And then you'll jump across the river and there's a very wealthy upper class community. So only a river is separating it. Now, the age expectancy that only the river separates, and this isn't just from homicide, okay, is 20 years. People that have experienced 6 or more events of trauma prior to the age of 18 are more likely to die 20 years younger than their counterpart at an average age of 60 instead of 80. And then we get to generational embodiment of historical trauma. There are groups of people who've been structurally violated for hundreds of years. And we even know from Dr. Alan Shore's work, it changes your DNA. It changes the way your RNA is transcribed. And if that's me, if that's my child, when I went into areas and I explained this to grandmas, because you know what? I didn't grow up in that community. I didn't. So why in the world would I think I could translate it to that community? But what I did is I hung out with some matriarchs and grand matriarchs and said, okay, this is the science stuff I know. I have no idea how to make it valuable here. And they're like, honey, come on, let's show you. And we opened up a church place and we just started talking. And by the end of the summer, we had 100 people a night. Just wanting to hear that conversation. This science is not so academic that people don't get it. I'm gonna give you a quick example, and I know I'm running short on time, is that with the brain, okay, we call it like, this is the downstairs brain, the limbic system, fight, flight, or freeze, upstairs brain, cerebral cortex. One model is this is the amygdala, all right? And when the amygdala is on fire, I need to go get support. So we taught that to, I had one of the people I trained, she taught it to some 4-year-olds in a daycare. And I was like, I don't really know how that's going to go. So then when they were at recess and a kid kind of had a meltdown, they all ran up to the little boy that had a meltdown. They said, his amygdala's on fire. His amygdala's on fire. We have to offer social support. And they came running around and we support you. So I want to see that kid in middle school because his journey will be different. Because he understood what was happening to his body, and he wasn't an angry Black boy that was seen that way because of structural violence, right? He understood what was happening inside of him. Now, what also becomes dangerous to those of us who are all that, like I love teaching my children about this until they use it against me. Right? And so what starts happening is the little 4-year-olds would run up to the teachers and go, I think your lid is slipping, Mrs. Jones. You know, is your amygdala on fire? No, I'm totally fine. So they're going to call us on our stuff. All right. So let me think about where I want to end this, because I will definitely give out my deck. This is where I want to go. So if you know this, PowerPoint is linear and I am not. So I work with that. So I just laid a lot on you. And the question is, well, what do I do with that? So my one ask is you already did it. You felt it. Number 2, share it with someone else. Don't stop taking pauses. I use ground in and ground out all the time. Use it, right? The next is don't forget about hope. Hope is not just a feeling. It is a sense of future self. Because if you do not have a sense of future self, you cannot get there. You cannot get there without a sense of what is possible. And right now, for many of us, we see no sense of future. And that is why we are languishing. We need to know that there is hope, that there is connection. We need to be able to access our resilience. I love this. In the past, jobs were about muscles. Now they are about brains, but in the future, they will all be about the heart. The only thing that kills me is it came from the London School of Economics. Damn, that should have come from human services. You know? And so it is about reconnecting to our emotion. Courage comes from the Latin root cur, which means heart. So courage is not badassery. It is living your life with your whole heart. It is feeling. And yet what has been required of us to tolerate oppression, to tolerate survival, is we have had to disconnect our heads from our bodies and say, oh yes, that's very sad, that thing about death of Black people. It's sad? It's sad? No, because what's happening is one of the reasons during colonization that people could tolerate it, people that look like me, was because I could not feel it with my heart. I was trained from the time I was born not to feel it, to cognitively address it, but not feel it. So we need to plug our heads back into our hearts and feel what is happening, not feel less, feel more. It is not sad. It is an outrage. It is cruel. It is unacceptable. Feel that. Plug our heads back into our hearts, reconnect, have conversations with one another, difficult conversations, tough conversations. You know, some people are like, well, it's probably because you're a mom of 3 kids that are of color, and maybe because you've read a lot of books. I mean, that's why you're comfortable having this conversation about diversity. And please don't let me reduce diversity to race. So I need to tell y'all, I'm wicked uncomfortable right now. Like, this is an uncomfortable conversation, like me asking questions, me trying. I remember sitting with my daughter who was 20, and I'm so into like the movement and doing stuff. And she sits down to eat with me, and I'm like, okay, I want you to know what I did. And I did this week. And she was like, Mom, have you read about Black fatigue? Because this is what everybody wants to talk to me right now. And I just wanted to eat lunch with my mom. So I love you. I'm glad you're activated, but I do this all the time every day, and I don't get to take it off. And I was like, whoa. And that hurts, because you know what? I've been studying this for 25 years and I still got my own. I'm gonna curse one time because I own my own business and I don't think I can get fired. I have to own that shit, right? That's my stuff. I have to reconnect. So now what I want to do with your closing is go back to your story. Go back to that story where something hard happened. What specifically about you made it work? Put some resilience in the chat because you already know what it is. What about you helps you bounce back when things are hard? Talk to me in the chat. What about you helps you bounce back when things are hard? Seeing what hurts. Beautiful, Hannah. Look at it. See it. Feel it. Optimism. I love it. My kids, courage and faith. Yes, our values. Connecting to our values. Learn how to ask for help. Huge resilience skill. Huge resilience skill. My energy is constantly being poured in the space, and I accept the pain of anyone in order to keep us going. Yeah, creating space for the pain. Knowing where I can get support. Yeah, so you got it. Y'all got it. This is resilience. I was supposed to teach you the resilience story. This is the resilience story. This is your resilience story. We call that resilience. Resilience has been shown to buffer the impact. We have studied it as a science. It's not that you either get it or you don't. We can teach resilience, and you have it inside of you. I know that I have been told that sometimes when I put attachments inside this chat, it's going to get wacky. So I know I'm going to send it in too, but I'm going to break the rules because that's just kind of who I am. I just stuck in a piece on the top 10 ways to build resilience. So there's this beautiful, I'm going to show these 2 things. There's this beautiful page, and you won't be able to read it on my slide, but I'm going to get it to Shakia, and I just put it in there. It says top 10 resilience practices. So Dr. Mann, who I'm so fortunate, not Dr. Mann, Susan Mann, who I'm fortunate enough to have as a coach. She has worked for the Gates Foundation in leadership with Miranda and Bill. She has coached on many, many things. She did a study where she asked people, what are the ways that they build resilience? Now, resilience is different from reset. Reset is the ground in that I did with you. Resilience is look after yourself, move your body, connect with love, get into nature, create something, make music, stretch and grow, play with pets, savor and enjoy, unplug from it all. Digital detox, real things, okay? So think about, how are you gonna boost your resilience, right? And how you're gonna get there, last thing, 60 seconds, is self-compassion. So if you're not familiar with Dr. Neff's work, one of the things to practice is being very tender with yourself. So I now say really weird stuff to myself, like, I love you, Allison. I love you. I love you. I love you. You were having a really hard day. And I say to myself what I would say to Jarvis if he was having a bad day, because I don't know how to say that to myself. I know how to say that to someone else. What it also lets me do is practice my mama bear, which says, if you were crossing my boundaries, I am going to say no. So that is self-compassion, right? That is self-compassion. So I want you to know that, folks, when you think about success today at 8:30, when we finish this up, success means we go to sleep knowing that our talents and abilities were used in the way that we served others. So service leadership. How will you use tonight and the information you absorb for yourself as well as in the service of others? Because hopefully 10% of why I'm useful at all is hopefully I've thought of some interesting things to talk about and maybe some good ways to present them, but 90% is y'all. 90% is you or Oz. You're the one that's going to make it happen 8:30. I can't do that. So you are the one that is going to take something away from tonight and make it matter. And that's all I got. Thank you so much for letting me talk for a minute. I really appreciate y'all.
All right. If that wasn't just as wonderful as it could be, woo! I'm feeling really good about the energy. Can you all do me a favor and pour some love into the chat for Dr. Allison Jackson Dyer, please? I'm going to wait 1 minute to feel some love, and I need it to be beyond thank you because she gave us more than a thank you. I need you. Yes, Cindy. Yeah,
I'm gonna say namaste. Namaste.
Yeah. Absolutely, because some of the things that we wrote in the chat were just seriously, unbelievable. I'm trying to, I can't, behind all the thank yous and all the wonderful things to say, I just have to say this. Self-soothing, knowing where I can get support. I've watched my mom do it, and I'm from the same stock, and redirecting my energy to something beneficial to me, retreating to my safe place and family and prayer and connecting with my faith and God and doing schoolwork and being with my kids and learning how to feel empathy and grounding into spirituality. People are talking real stuff here, being true optimism, seeing what hurts, needing to plug our heads back into our hearts and feel. How about that at 5:30 to 6:17? We still have a little bit more time to go. And Nadira hasn't even talked yet. Kelsey hasn't even talked yet. I didn't say anything. Oh man, this is great for me. I love this. I don't know if you can get all of this energy in one place, but I'm feeling good about it. Before we open up to any questions, I want to tell you all that this experience that we're having right now was part of a series. There was a meditation and a focus on self-consciousness and understanding that you pour into yourself so that you can make sure that your cup is full, right? So that your cup is not empty. And we just learned here that this whole idea of service and engagement is not only about helping other people, but it's also about helping ourselves. So we've just reaffirmed what we talked about in the first idea of having a meditation. We're bringing everything full circle. So you all, there are videos, they're going to be videos. And we also had a panel discussion about social services and trauma-informed care. And there, we just unpacked all of these experiences for trauma, specific fields of study, but all of those things that they talked about were so pertinent to the everyday experiences that everybody goes through every day. And so it was like you could contextualize all of these things that have been happening in the NICU and all of the things that were happening in nursing homes. And those same things were actually happening in unique ways in our living rooms and at home and with our family members. And it just became so dynamic and so real. And it became something like Allison said, like, are we paying attention to what's even happening? Like, are we processing even what's going on? I wrote in the chat that I refuse to take the time to pay attention to the amount of multitasking that I have to do on a regular basis. Like, I refuse to even write it down or to look at it because it's ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. but at the same time, I know what my role is. I know what it is that I'm supposed to do. And so this series, this workshop, this series about trauma-informed care, and even the next session that we had was about criminal justice and looking at how we deal with people who break the rules, and just understanding that rules are being broken all over the place. Rules are being broken, but some of the rules aren't being broken because we're bad people, because trauma is something that is happening to us. It is not, who we are. And so it's a whole nother way to process and understand what's going on, and a different context and a way to treat people and to be emotionally intelligent. And oh my goodness, are we going to talk about emotional intelligence tonight? So we're going to pull everything so full circle for you. I can't even tell you, but one thing that we did with the last session on criminal justice, which was super powerful to me, is we talked about the why. And the why is like, why the heck do you do what it is that you do, and how you get us to think about why in the world we do this. Like, why are we here? Why are we multitasking? Why are we giving on to people? Why are we so willing to not look back at what was happening and to not acknowledge, so that we have the strength and power to access the reality that is in the future, what we need to grab, where we need to go. And so Dr. Watson and Dr. Allison Jackson Dyer are going to tell us the why. They're going to tell us. That's the first question I'm going to ask you.
Ooh,
why?
ooh.
Why? Yeah, why?
I'm so excited. Oh gosh, Danielle, I know we don't have enough time. I want y'all to watch. I'm gonna send you a link. I have a 3-minute video that I'm dying to freaking show right now because it goes right where you are. But I don't know, is that okay? Or you want me to talk? Oh wait, I can't hear you.
Oh, that's okay. You read my voice. I know you all can hear me through the mute.
I know.
We want the video and we want you to talk.
All right,
So-
okay, all right. Because you went there, and then I want to hear Jarvis's opinion about this. So I want.
Mhm.
Oh,
It's
sorry.
okay. She's got it. It's all good. Unmute.
I don't know what I
She's
just
got
did.
it.
I hit the wrong button.
Oh, it's gonna happen. She's got it. We'll get it.
Unmute. All
There we
right.
go.
Thank you. All right. So here we
Series
go.
is called How Do I Know? And a lot of times when people hear the phrase, how do I know? The next thing they say is what? How do I know what? But the key really isn't to know what, the key is to know why. Because when you know your why, you have options on what your what can be. For instance, my why is to inspire people to walk in purpose. My what is stand-up comedy. My what is writing books. My what can be going out with some friends to eat. In fact, another what that has moved me towards my why is a web series that we have out now called Break Time. So every Wednesday at 3 o'clock, you should subscribe to the channel. We do a series called Break Time on YouTube. So 3 o'clock, we drop a new episode. One episode in particular, I'm about to show you a clip to. We're in Winston-Salem. So Break Time, this is how it works. I travel the country, I do stand-up comedy, probably an hour and a half at an event. And in the middle of my show, I'll just sit down and start talking to the audience. And funny just happens. Or I'll meet somebody who's really interesting. So I met this one guy, and he said that he teaches music at a school. I was like, all right, you teach music, can you sing? And then I'm just gonna show you the clip. Check it. So you're a musical director. Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right, so let me get a couple bars of like Amazing Grace. Can you do the first part of that? Go ahead.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me.
Wow. That bro could sing. You know what I'm saying? All right. Now, what you give me the version is if your uncle just got out of jail, you got shot in the back when you was a kid. I'm just saying, let me see the hood version real quick, if you know which version I'm talking about. Just see if that exists. Let me see what you got.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. Right now I'm fine, was blind, but now I see.
So here's the thing. The first time I asked him to sing, he knew what he was doing. The second time I asked him to sing, he knew why he was doing it. When you know your why, your what has more impact because you're walking in or towards your purpose.
So that's it. As my guys that I teach in jail say, that's a drop the mic moment. But my answer, and I'll pass it over to Jarvis, is for me, it is really knowing, like, my why, my two top values in life are authenticity and connection. And they guide me towards everything I do. And any moment in the day, if I'm dodging an email, if I'm dodging a person, if I'm wanting to not look at something, I immediately know I'm stepping out of my values, I'm stepping out of my why, and that's not okay with me. And when I'm uncomfortable, I'm growing, and I'm choosing a life to be uncomfortable because my values matter to me. And so that would be my response. And when I know my why, my what makes sense. I know the next right thing to do. So I'm gonna pass it to you, Jarvis.
That's not fair.
I know you gotta follow Michael Jr.
Oh man, you know what? As we talk about music, I'm thinking about a song, and I'm from New Jersey, and there's a famous group called Parliament Funkadelic, and there's a song that they had called Maggot Brain. Now, it sounds a little weird, but if you know anything about guitar solos, this was one of the most revered solos. Just go on YouTube and type in Maggot Brain, and you see how many people have done this variation. And the story behind that is that George Clinton went to, I think, Hazel was like, I want you to play this solo, but act as if you just lost your mother or you lost your father. And if you ever listen to Maggot Brain, it has this like slow kind of like crescendo, it builds up. And you can tell the part where it's just like he's thinking about, if I lost my mother, when I lost my mother, it was like, I was like, dang, when that guy sung, I thought I went straight to that particular song. And when I do my work here at wherever I am, I think about who came before me. I think about my father, who was a high school teacher teaching science, a Black man teaching science in a predominantly Black school. How the people looked up to him in regards to what he taught them, that he couldn't talk about, had that power. He didn't empower them, he tapped into their power. So my why is connected to my legacy, is connected to people who came before me, to know that where I sit or where I stand, where I'm standing right now, I can't let the legacy down. I can't be disconnected from my words and my actions. Whatever I do has to have some type of purpose, some type of meaning, that when I leave anyone's interaction, they're like, yo, something just happened magical just now. When I shake someone's hand, when I say good morning, I want them to feel like you are the most important person right there. So my why is connected to, I guess, my connection with the people who I serve. And then my what is how I go about doing my business. The how is how often, no matter what time of the day it is, or night, I'm still going to be me. I'm coming with it. And in the same way that I connect, even when I was doing this particular presentation, I have to leave in about 2 minutes, got to go to another event. I was playing Terrence Blanchard, his soundtrack for the Requiem for the Katrina victims.
Yeah.
And something about the music, something about his emotion, that his why. I was tapping to his why while I was doing this. So I was trying to channel some things that happened maybe 4 or 5, 6, maybe, I don't know, when Katrina happened, like 10 years ago. Yeah. And I was trying to channel that to bring it into you all today. So hopefully, I was able to articulate my emotions as well as my intellect today to help you all understand that this trauma that we're facing, okay, all right, Shaquita, I gave you 2 thumbs up, all right.
Yeah.
It was something that's just not a presentation, but it's something that is part of our legacy, it's part of our purpose, it's part of our mission, why we are here today. The fact that I'll probably be going home at like 12 o'clock tonight, but because I know this is important for you out there in Zoom land, it was important for my father to teach me. It's important for me to teach my future kids. It's important, the ones I have right now, to understand that this is the only time we have right now to do what we have to do. So I stand on the shoulders of giants, and I hope I leave you all with some inspiration. And I'll put my email in the chat. And please reach out.
Jarvis, I will in no way be able to follow that. And I know we got like 60 seconds, but I just want to say how grateful I am you brought in legacy. I felt my throat get tight and my eyes tear up when you talked about your father and that responsibility. It reminds me of what you did when you brought us in, of the land we stand on. And I think about immediately what came up is my 4-year-old grandson, who is very dark skinned. And when I look at him, I know that right now people look at him and he is beautiful and he is strong, and the world at 12 will see him as a threat. And I'm not okay with that. And when I think about that passion and that legacy of paying it forward, because we have to say, keep our hearts connected and feel this, because we have to move it forward. And I want to do my part in that, which is why I'm so grateful that this brought us together. And I'm grateful for you.
Oh man, thank you all. Thank you, Doc. I'm glad to meet you, Shaquita. Thank you for putting, Dr. Shaquita.
Absolutely.
Putting all this
No,
together.
I am. I'm Shaquita.
She's a matchmaker. She's a matchmaker.
Hey, I know we got to get together some other time, but I don't want to stop the progress. But it's been my pleasure, my honor, and let's look for part 2 or round 2 or 3, 4, and 5. We are
It's together. That's right. In it together.
So, okay, everyone, I need to talk to you all about what happens next. In the chat, I placed the groups, Group A and Group B. I contacted you all via email, and I provided you with a group. There is a workshop link there for Group A or for Group B. Stay on here if you don't know what in the world you're doing and you need me to be there. I'm going to stay with you for a moment because I need to run into my workshop so that I can give my talk as well. But workshop A and workshop B, I need you to go into the Zoom links for those, just to make things easier.
What are your plans for this evening?
Well,
I'm supposed to be studying because I have a test.
Come on, Courtney. All right. All right, so workshop A, if you need to go to workshop A, break out now. Close out this Zoom link that you're in right now. Close this one out and then log into the new one. If you're going into workshop B, this is your link. So I will see you all there. So everybody go, get out of this link. Nobody should be left here. Don't come back here. Go to either A or B and you'll be greeted with a host. Bye, Brielle. B. All right, Cindy's gonna navigate here. Cindy, you're gonna stay here and help people into workshop A or workshop B if they don't know where they're going? Yeah? I'm going to workshop.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I'm stopping the recording on this and then Annie's gonna start the recording in the other session. I'm stopping, okay? All right, Crystal's in the other one. I'm leaving.